Hi everyone, it's Aga. Today we're back with a new tier list video. This time it's for the group versus group format, from 2 to 6 people in a group. As with the previous tier list, I'll be giving you my opinion on what's strong, moderately strong, or out of meta. I'll go into detail for each character. We'll be looking at different group compositions. There are quite a few possible groups for each character. There are specific groups like work packs. I'll be covering that in the video. And there you have it. Of course, I should remind you that this is just my opinion. I'm giving you my view based on what I see in game, what works best and what works less well. You're obviously free to do as you please, to make up your own mind about it. Right, now that's out of the way, we'll get started straight away with the Defiler Heal. The Defiler Heal is a very good character, who combos really well with a War Leader. You'll be putting heals over time on your whole group. You'll be able to do rotations that will really cushion the DPS that you're... The Defiler Heal is, in my opinion, less strong in a group than in a raid. The Defiler Heal will struggle to survive. If you're the only healer in your group, or if the people in your team don't protect you enough. If, for example, you have 2 champions coming at you and harassing you with DPS, you won't last very long, because you do have healing. But the main problem is that you have a lot of casting to do for your spells. And on top of that, you don't really have any survival spells. For me, a survival spell isn't just healing. It would be a spell that reduces the damage you take, makes you invulnerable, invisible, that sort of thing. I don't know, could be a speed boost, something that lets you escape, you know, all those sorts of things. I'll give you some concrete examples. The War Leader healer, for me, he has survival spells, he's got mobilise, he's got an anti-stun, he's got a shield that reduces the damage he takes. In fact, he's got 2 because he's got his personal shield and his group shield. He also has to cast much less. The Defiler healer, mainly it. His problem in small groups compared to raids, because in raids you won't necessarily be targeted continuously, you won't necessarily be focused right from the start. We might be able to... We'll target black arrows, wargs, defilers, mages. You'll be able to blend into the crowd when you're in a group. It won't be as simple as that, you'll very often be the first target. To rank the Defiler, it's quite complicated because it depends on what you have in your group. In a group where you have a second healer, a war leader, a spider putting out crowd control to help you, the Defiler can be very interesting. Because in addition to your heals, you're the only creep character who can cleanse debuffs. Damage over time effects on yourself and your allies with a spell. You have some very interesting buffs. It's a character that's far from bad. It's a very good character. It's just that it suffers from a lack of survival spells. I've always said that we should do it like the Herky Hill, because if we stick to a logic of symmetry, which class is the closest? The closest to the Defiler healer on the Free People side. For me, it's the Hercules. He has a group bubble that gives you temporary morale, which can allow you to absorb a certain amount of damage for a while. I've always said they should remove the current Defiler bubble and replace it with a group morale bubble. That's something we don't have on Creep side. I've always said that. That would give him a survival skill for himself and his team. That's it. It's just my opinion. So, if you're in a group where you're being protected, you've got another healer. The Defilers isn't bad, He can really bring something extra to the team. But if you're the only healer, if you're in a group where you can't apply much crowd control, you'll often get killed very quickly. Unfortunately, then you won't be able to do your job properly. That's why I'm going to put him between B and A. A is for the characters I've marked as strong. It's when they're strong no matter the situation. B is medium, it's average, it's not great. I'm not going to say the Defiler is average, because in my opinion that's not true. He has a lot of advantages. I can't put him in strong because you'll be very dependent on your group's composition. I'm going to put him in B+. I've marked it as situational, which means you're between A and B. Why between A and B? Because if you're in a group where you can be protected and helped, you'll still be very strong. But you won't be strong in every situation, so it was quite situational. Whereas if you've seen my other tier list, the character, I put him in A+, because I consider that in raids he's very strong. For me, the Defiler, in the current raid, that's where he stands. In a group, it'd be more here, between A and B. Now that's done, we'll move on to the Warrior. Little damage. Well, damage debuff, because for me it's supposed to be more of a debuff. For me, the War Little damage is probably the best character at the moment. In the sense that what makes you strong or weak in a group is what you can bring to the group, and what others can't bring, unlike you. For example, War Little damage is very strong because he soaks up quite a lot of damage and brings both buffs and debuffs to his team. He brings really high DPS and a bit of survivability, as you have a decent heal even when playing DPS. You can increase your team's mobility. You see, you do a lot of things. For example, the Defiler heal doesn't do as much as that. That's why I consider the character to be very strong. The War Leader damage buff. In my trait tier list I've put that he's broken. I'm not going to explain why, you can watch the other video if you're interested. I'm going to put him in A+. Why not in S? Because depending on your group's composition, for example, if you have a group without a healer, with good crowd control, the flips, if they've got good control or a lot of healing, you'll go down. Not quickly, but thanks to the control and the heals, you use up your spells. You'll be killed, and you won't have anything left to secure a kill. It's quite easy to stop you from getting kills or applying your buffs properly. The DPS War Leader still needs to have some healing behind him. Not completely broken in small groups either. So I'm going to put it in A+, because it's very strong. And you bring a lot to your team, which is absolutely fine. Personally, I think that's very good. But sticking to the logic of making a symmetry with the free peoples, personally, that's how I tend to operate. I quite like doing that. Creating symmetry with the opposing side for balancing purposes. I think the closest equivalent to the WD is the Red Captain. The Red Captain doesn't deal as much raw damage as the WD. I think they should reduce the WD's raw damage, but increase the number of buffs he can provide to himself and his team. For example, you might say it's normal for him to deal damage. Yes, I agree, but is it really normal for him to sometimes deal more damage than a Reaver? I don't think that's quite right. I think he should be given more buffs for himself and his team. For example, when he attacks, it could deploy an aura around him to boost the health, power and damage of his allies, but reduce his raw damage. Next, let's move on to the Red Defiler. The Red Defiler mainly plays a debuffing role against your enemies. Even though his DPS isn't bad, especially in a group, his damage is more effective in a group than in a raid, I find, in my opinion. The problem with the Red Defiler is the same as with the Defiler Healer, but even worse, because here you still don't have any survival spells. But on top of that, you hardly have any of your heals left. So the character's strong because you bring debuffs that others can't provide. For example, you have a very good armor debuff, which allows you to take down certain heavily armoured characters much more quickly. That's a very positive point when you're in a group. In terms of your damage, it's mainly damage over time. I'm gonna put this character alongside the Defiler Healer, because to perform well in your group, you'll need to have a well-constructed group. You'll need healing and crowd control to allow you to execute your damage rotation and apply your debuffs. You also have some rather interesting crowd control abilities, such as Fear of the Zone when you're a Defiler. But I can't say it's strong, because you won't be a strong character in every situation. I'm not going to put it as average, because you do have some spells that are actually quite good. I'm going to put it somewhere in between. It's good, situationally. What it would need to move up in the rankings is the same as before, a survival spell, but different from the Defiler heal. I think, for example, it could provide a morale bubble, but only for yourself when you're a Defiler. A bit like Champion A or LKA. I honestly believe that could significantly assist in moving the character up in the competitive rankings. Now let's move on to War Leader Heal. Now a Leader Heal, in my opinion, it is absolutely the best healer for small groups. You have plenty of survival spells at your disposal and an incredibly strong heal to keep everyone alive. You don't actually have to cast very often if you manage your Power of Fear resource effectively and keep a close eye on your positioning during the heat of battle. The advantage of War Leader Heal in group compositions is that if you really master your character, you'll be able to solo heal groups much more easily. If you're in a group where you have Reavers, BAs, or only Spiders, you'll be able to completely solo heal your group. Of course, if you have Spiders, they'll need to use their crowd control to help you out. You still need to play as a team, Let me remind you that PS characters can also protect other members of their team. But there you go, it'll be more comfortable to solo heal as a war leader than as a Defiler. Just so you know. The War Leader Healer, I'm going to put in A+, because you're good in all team compositions. You bring a lot to your team. If you play Power of Fear well, you hardly have any casting to do. It's a very good character, and the buffs on your banners aren't half bad. Overall, you sync up really well with all the characters in the game. For example, the Mobilize, if you're with a Reaver, if you're on voice chat with a Reaver on Discord. The Reaver uses his charge, and as soon as his charge cooldown is over, well, as soon as he's no longer sprinting, you can use Mobilize, which gives him another sprint, and then he can use his charge again. So there you go, that's a really strong combo, for example. If you're playing with a Spider, for example, you can bubble your Spider, heal her back to full health, and once you've used your bubble, she goes underground. You heal her back to full health and she comes back out. If the fight goes on a bit, you'll be able to use your bubble again. You can see there are quite a few combinations with the other characters. Now let's move on to the Warg Shadow. Here I've put him in red, that's the Shadow. This one will be the Flyer, I'll show you that later. The Warg Shadow is a character, so for me, the Warg is a character I really like. But we have to stay objective, so the Warg in Shadow form, it's a character that does suffer a bit from certain things. For me, as you will have understood, the logical thing would be to compare him to the Boggler on the Free People side. I find that the Shadow Rock compared... Boggler, when he hits you, he gets quite a bit of health back, generally speaking. He has quite a lot of life drain. I think they should do something like that for the Warg, to give him a bit more survivability. But not too much either, because the Shadow Warg isn't supposed to be a tank. We're more likely to have the different damage or the Warg Flyer who will do that. But I think he should drain a bit more life. A buff to his sprint like before. A few things would need to be tweaked. Nevertheless, the Shadow Warg in a group is a very good character. In quite a few compositions. So you'll need, obviously, preferably, to have 2 healers and at least a war leader as a healer. Because when you take a really big burst of focus, even if you're up against 5 or 6 enemy players, you can go down very quickly. Now the War Shadow, it's over time that you'll be able to scout for your team. You'll be able to go ahead as a scout to indicate enemy positions. You'll be able to track all the races of the Free Peoples. You're the only character who can track hobbits, which is very powerful. You're the only character who has a spell to detect invisible enemies. You also have a Dozen Fear, which applies a very good debuff, which works very well against heavy armour too. You have a Silence ability, which is very strong against tactical characters, who deal you tactical damage. You'll be able to stop them from casting half or perhaps even 3/4 of their spells for a certain period. You deal good damage when you hit people from behind, but only when you strike them from behind. Try to get around the sides or behind the person to deal damage to them. It's also a very strong character for Warg packs, as when you're in a pack with other Wargs and you all pounce on a target at the same time. It's really, really powerful. The Warg in Shadow, I wouldn't want to put it there, but as I said before, you'll be quite dependent on your group composition. Take a Warg, so it excels in a group. Not to mention your mastery of the character. You'll need to form a group with 2 healers. Not 1, but 2 to be comfortable, with a war leader as one of the 2. Or else play it in a warp pack. If you have a setup with 2 healers or you're in a war pack, personally I'd be inclined to put it in A tier. But I'm going to put it in B+, because it's too situational. That is to say, if you don't have a healer, you're going to take too much damage. Meaning that you won't be self-sufficient enough. You see what I mean? A Warg pack is different. You might say, in a Warg pack we don't have a healer. Yes, but in a war pack you'll have the advantage of surprise. You'll be synchronised with all the others. Warg. You'll all be striking from behind, synchronising your crowd control. You'll deal massive damage. And when you get a kill, you'll get your heal from the defeat reaction. Or if you all stack your heals, it makes for a heal that's actually not too shabby. The Warp Pack is a bit of a special case. But otherwise, unfortunately, it's a bit too situational. But the character is still very strong, very interesting. There you go. Now let's move on to the Black Arrow. The Black Arrow is a bit like the Warg, in the sense that it's the mirror character. On the Free People side, it's the Hunter. The Hunter, when playing in Blunyon, That's the specialisation that allows you to be very agile and shoot while moving. The advantage of hunters is that when they shoot at you while moving, they drain quite a lot of your health and heal themselves a lot. And with the agile form of the Black Arrow, the front shearer, you don't have that life drain. That's what I currently criticise a bit about the character at the moment as I'm making this video. In my opinion, they should add this Dranvik to the hunter on its agile form on its frontierer. On the other hand, when you play as a Persian Eye, you have very good burst and very good single target control. Multi-target control isn't bad either, if you equip your trait that allows you to root with your Rain of Harrow. But you also suffer from a lack of survivability against tactical characters. You don't have a survival spell against them. Your dodge spell, which allows you to dodge certain enemy spells, doesn't work on tactical spells. Against an LM, an EK, a Minstrel, all those classes. There, you'll see that it won't work. It won't work against certain Mariner spells either, for example. When they throw fire at you, there, it won't work. So there you go, it's the same for the BA. You'll be very dependent on your team's composition. For the BA, you need at least one healer in your group. And I'd even say two, it's a bit like the Work Shadow. So, there you have it, the BA. For me, it's situational. Unfortunately, it's a bit like the Defiler Hill. That is to say, you're a character who will really shine in raids. In a group, it's a bit more situational. But it's still a very good character, you can play it, no worries. Now let's move on to the Reaver. The Reaver is a very powerful character in a group. He doesn't ever need a lot of things. You've got very good AoE damage, you've got very good single target damage, you deal very good damage overall over time, and you've also got a very good burst. You're quite resilient. The advantage with the Reaver is that you'll be able to play in a group with only one healer, because you still have good survivability. I think the main disadvantage of the Reaver in a group, as opposed to in a raid, is that you don't bring much crowd control to your team. That's what I mentioned earlier, what makes you strong or weak compared to other classes. In your group, it's about what you can bring and what you don't bring. The Reaver doesn't bring much crowd control, so you'll need to balance the lack of control with other characters. But if we put that detail aside, the Reaver is a very good character for groups. Personally, I put it in A+ alongside the War Leader. At the moment, it's very powerful. What I'd criticise a little. It's a bit like the equivalent of a champion. It should add a morale bubble instead of your defeat response skill that reduces your damage taken. But that's just my opinion. As for the Whack Flyer, for me, I'd put it in A tier. Because the Whack Flyer brings you a lot of things. You can play it less tanky than you would in raids. But not entirely as DPS, you do a hybrid build, and you'll see that you'll tank quite a bit of damage, and you'll deal perfectly decent damage as well. You'll bring a huge amount of control for your team, unlike the River. You can play it in groups where there's only one healer. It'll work out. Because you're much more resilient than a Warg Shadow, and you still keep your tracking skill that the Warg Shadow has. It's a character that's very versatile, very useful for your team. Don't hesitate to play it. The Spider, for me, is also a very strong character in a group. It's a very versatile character. You'll have really strong crowd control, both single target and multi-target. You'll be very good for Pile, for example, You'll put yourself in a defensive position near your healers and apply crowd control and debuffs to your targets, allowing your healers to cast their spells and heal your team. You've got very good survivability, and you also deal very good damage, even if it's mainly damage over time. Your survivability really isn't bad at all. You can play in groups where there's only one healer. What the Spider lacks a bit is burst damage. Burst is when you use 2 spells and within 4 or 5 seconds you unleash massive DPS on your target. To deal a lot of damage, you'll need to stack your damage over time effects. You'll see that it's a bit slower. But once you've applied all your poison stacks to your target, you'll notice you're dealing very good damage as well. So the Spider is a character I'm going to rate higher, because she brings a lot to a team. There we are, we've covered all the characters for group versus group. Let me remind you that this video is a tier list for groups of 2 to 6 people. Not for solo play, not for raids. Of course, if your character is ranked lower than another, it doesn't mean you can't play them or that you're useless, far from it. In fact, I've never said that any of the characters here are useless. It's just that, well, some of them are struggling. A bit more than others in the current meta, and some could really do with a bit of a buff. But overall, you can play whatever you like, there's no problem with that. And there you have it. Thank you for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed it and that you learned something new. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask me in the comments, and I'll see you in the next video. Cheers, bye.